Look, this will be a lot of fun. We're going to kick it right off. I'm Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice, General Partner of Project Voice Capital Partners, and excited to be hosting this with Authenticx. Erika Sylvester is with me. Erika, take a moment. Tell us who you are. Tell us about Authenticx.
Sure, sure. Well, thanks for having me, Bradley. I'm excited to be here today. I'm General Counsel and Head of Compliance for Authenticx. We are a top conversational intelligence platform for healthcare organizations. So what does that mean that we do? We review data from the recorded customer service conversations. We use our proprietary AI to assess that data, provide insights, and really support our clients in protecting and improving patient safety on the other side through processes and procedure updates. So that's a little bit about what we do, but I'm really excited to be here today. My background is in, general corporate work. The last couple of years has been heavy in the AI regulatory space, so it's just it's a wild and crazy time.
Well, yeah, it's exciting. Authenticx has raised over $30 million of venture capital dollars. From that point of view alone, it's exciting to hear your perspective. Not every AI company has a lawyer in the house, and so we're excited from that perspective as well. I'm going to make you host, and while I'm
Sure.
doing that, I will explain. If anybody has questions, if you use the Q&A function of Zoom rather than put them in the chat, that's great. Everybody who's registered will receive the audio and video of the webinar after it's over. So if you miss part of it, that's okay. You'll get that in your inbox. So Erika, you are host. If you want to take it away, and then I'll react in real time to what you show, and I'll ask you some questions afterward.
Sure, sounds good. Let me get my screen share going and you let me know. Can you see my screen?
I think it's working now. Yes, there we go.
All
So
right.
I will go on mute while you're doing. Erika, appreciate you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Bradley. All right, sorry a little bit there for the technical difficulties, but we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about the forefront of AI today. We're going to get into some more specific spaces. We'll talk about what the state of regulation is today. We're going to talk about the state and the federal perspectives. Then we're going to get into the FDA guidelines. Those were just released in January of this year. And then overall, we're going to kind of take it home with some of the compliance themes from those FDA guidelines, but you'll find that they're kind of applicable both at that state and federal level. So we don't have a ton of time today, so I'm going to stay high level. I'm going to give some of my observations, certainly not legal advice. Talk to your own legal teams for all of that, but happy to just kind of hopefully serve as a guide to work our way through where we're at today. So AI regulation today. It's basically like we are playing a game. We know that there are rules. We know that there are some enforcers of those rules, but we're not exactly sure when they're going to enforce those rules or how they're going to enforce those rules. We have concerns about safety. Everybody wants to win in their space. And there's just kind of a lot of or lack of clarity. So the image on the screen, if anybody follows basketball, sports in general, Caitlin Clark lately has been just really getting it taken at her. And I felt like this image kind of conveyed what the state of AI regulation is today for all of that chaos and regulation that exists, but maybe not being enforced. So that's my hook, and that's the start to talk about all of this. I'm going to hopefully give some more guidance to make it less chaotic, and certainly for those of us in the healthcare space, really keeping patient safety at the forefront. So, trying to protect our girl Caitlin here. All right, so AI state legislation. So starting at the state level, we have had and we've seen a significant surge in legislation. You can see back in 2023, which was frankly really early now that we kind of have been in this space for 2 years, to have 191 bills enacted. 2024, we jump up to just shy of 700. And then 2025, that's just the first half. So that's not even including this past month, which July is generally a pretty significant month for implementation of bills for several states. So really the purpose of this is just to show you how much is happening in the United States. This isn't even speaking to the global environment as it pertains to AI legislation. These numbers of bills, sometimes people are like, well, we got 50 states. Yes, we have, well, 50, 51, states that are implementing these things. And we've got several states that have more than one. Not many anymore ish have none and soon to be implemented. So how do we work through all of these things? How do we comply with them? AI in and of itself, like many technologies, is really borderless, right? So just because you are in one state and either using AI or building AI, we should never assume that we just have to comply with one state. So how the heck do we work through 780 alone that have gone into effect this year? Well, what I've tried to do for the purposes of today is identify just what some of these key state trends are. That doesn't mean that this is in every state's bill or bills, plural. But I think these are really the important aspects for us to hone in on. I think that these are important for the most part. I'll take out deepfake protections aside. These other three are really important for the healthcare industry, particular when we think about patient safety and understanding what's impacting patients and how we're going to better manage that through the use of AI. So these are my 4 points. So first and foremost, we've got transparency. Really what transparency is about is it's demystifying how we're using AI. So that is giving clarity to those who are engaging with our AI when they may not know it. This is taking away the question mark and the concern from those people who think or maybe are afraid to engage with AI. It also opens up the aspect of consent. So when you are engaging with AI in different ways or your information is being processed by AI, it's ensuring that you are providing the proper consent for the AI to process your information. Now, that can go down many different rabbit holes, and we could have several different sessions on that alone. But that's really the high level as to what the purpose of transparency in so many of these bills are getting towards. Then we talk about high risk use and oversight. So high risk use, this is really kind of hearkening, and we're not taking a global aspect today because of limitations on time, and we don't need to talk about that many laws, but the global perspective weighed in on this high risk use oversight because the EU AI Act is entirely a risk-based approach. So some states have taken that approach as well, but high risk use oversight is essentially ensuring that different AI uses that have higher risk impacts have greater either regulation or greater guidelines that they have to follow. So let's talk about an example. That might be a medical device that is being fully controlled by AI. That's pretty high risk. If we're using a medical device to directly impact a patient or support a patient in some way, that has a direct risk associated with it to that patient. So that's going to be maybe a high risk use that maybe we need to have additional risk assessments performed. Maybe we need to have different aspects of our company's regulators approving that, i.e. the FDA, right? Disclosing how we're using that. So that's really where we get into the high risk use cases. Also may come into play if we're using AI for job applications, maybe for insurance coverage. So if we're submitting a claim and having AI process it and the outcome is whether or not they're going to have coverage, that's a bit more high risk because that's going to have an impact on me if I don't have coverage. So we're going to put greater parameters on that high risk space. That doesn't mean everything in healthcare, because it's healthcare, is going to be deemed high risk. It is just that fact by fact scenario in terms of how it is going to impact an individual. Then we've got deepfake protections. To me, this always goes a little political. It's the political ads that are put out there fraudulently without consent, not using the, well, it looks like it's the person or the politician that is presenting this argument or this position, but it is in fact not, right? It's artificially created. And so whenever we have something that's manipulated or not the real deal, we need to identify it as such so people cannot be dissuaded or their mind changed based on false information. Lastly, and the most important one in my mind, and what I find to be incredibly interesting, is the human accountability to the spectrum of AI. And sometimes people think that that's absolutely backwards. AI is supposed to take humans out of it, and we're supposed to be able to rely on the AI to do more of our work. Well, while that might be true in some way, humans should and will, in my opinion, always be the managers of AI. We don't ever want to take our humans out of the loop. We need them managing it from the beginning to the end. We want them involved in the process, in managing what the data looks like and going in fixing any kind of drift in that data set. And we want to ensure that the output is constantly managed, viewed by humans so that they can use their own decision-making ability based upon their background, experience, education, etc., to ensure that that output is accurate and usable for the purpose that it's being presented to them. Right? So this could be something where I'm talking about safety and I put something into an AI model and it starts talking about Caitlin Clark getting pushed down. Well, okay, that's an aspect of safety, but I'm talking about patient safety. So I don't think that that's accurate. And it seems like my model that was supposed to be specific to healthcare is starting to drift if we're talking about basketball. So this human accountability is just critically important. Next, we're going to transition into the federal approach. And so right now, note that I have approach. It's not, it's an executive order. It is not a regulation. It is not legislation. It is not something with which Authenticx as a company or anyone in the audience is specifically complying with. And instead, it is a plan. It's called the US AI Action Plan, and it does two things. This just came out at the end of July, so it's relatively new. You may be familiar with it. It does a couple of things the few things that it takes out are Biden had an executive order that addressed AI risk, bias, and transparency. They've taken that out entirely and replaced it with this US AI Action Plan. It attempts to discourage that state level AI regulation, and it tries to tie grant funding to that regulation reduction. So basically saying if you have more regulation in your state, you might not get the grant money. We'll see how that plays out, but that's what's proposed within this plan. And lastly, this is definitely politically motivated. They're trying to remove the references to DEI and climate and whatnot from the open source AI that is out there and in existence. What it does focus on is wants to make the US a global leader in AI and tries to set out the ways that the different departments are going to be able to support that vision. So we want to build more infrastructure in order to allow the US to host all of these larger panels of AI to ensure that our energy is sufficient and that we're doing everything that we can to allow us to build to become that global leader. It touches on our export strategy to ensure that we here in the US can do things and not have to be reliant upon different global trade partners. Lastly, it addresses the aspect of international diplomacy, which I guess I just talked about, and then also security to try to make sure that we are not going to be impacted by external sources from this technological warfare sense. So it's got a lot of ideas in terms of how we, as an industry, the AI industry, want to develop over time and improve. Okay, transitioning. I know these are like quick left turn, right turn. We're into the FDA AI guidelines in healthcare. So this is going to be industry specific for healthcare. This just came out in January. It's 23 pages. And how it's formatted is it's essentially providing the FDA's position. They're looking for feedback on this before they get it finalized. But it's the FDA's position on what they believe to be an appropriate use of AI in, be it pharmacovigilance, and other areas that are within the FDA's scope. So it's guidance for AI developers, that would be Authenticx. It's guidance for the healthcare industry in general and how they're implementing different tools. So it's going to focus on protecting public health, ensuring AI models used in decision-making are trustworthy in different ways that it can become trustworthy and the different tests that are going to be associated with it and so forth. So it's got quite a bit of content in it. But again, in my attempt to try to distill down to make this information usable and for you to take it away with you today, we've got three major compliance themes. So, what the FDA is posing is please assess your risk. Please use high quality data. Please make sure you're monitoring and maintaining any AI that you are utilizing in this regulated field. So if we want to walk through each of those core areas, and I'll do this relatively quickly to make sure that we have enough time, Bradley, to kind of continue the open conversation. But when we're assessing the risk, we really want to think about what's the potential impact on a patient. So this is like, how are the decisions being made? What could happen by using AI in this space? Is it physical harm, like we talked about with potentially a medical device being given the wrong coding via AI to have it functioning? Or is it a basic piece of information like the wrong phone number to their provider? How much is it going to impact the patient's safety? And also, how much do we rely on AI for the final decision? Do we have humans managing the output such that it is one component of 10 different components that we're going to rely on to make our decision? That's where the risk spectrum kind of comes in and vacillates. Next, using high quality data. This one's really, really important and something that I think feels more technical than it is. So to me, it's really like garbage in, garbage out. If you've got bad information, if you've got outdated information, if you've got just inapplicable information, then your model is going to provide you with that information. So be really clear if you're a healthcare company engaging with an AI vendor, be really clear on what their data set contained and how their models were trained. Because oftentimes it may be very general. And sometimes the purpose is okay to be industry agnostic, but if you're using it for more of a medical purpose, you probably want the data set to be very much toned into that area. You want to make sure that the data that is used to train the model is free from bias. That can happen in a lot of different ways. It might be in the training data, eliminating bias before it's even processed. It might be on the tail end in monitoring and maintaining it in the testing that would be performed from an accuracy standpoint. There's a lot of different ways to manage that, but really important to ask those questions if you are utilizing AI in your workplace. So lastly, monitor and maintain. I think this is kind of what I talked about in terms of the humans in the loop, ensuring that we're not setting and forgetting it, right? We need to be in control of this. We need to make sure that we understand what the outputs are and that it's working the way that we want it to work. And make sure that any AI that you're using can be controlled for that kind of drift, right? Talking about what we want it to talk about and not getting into some different area or creating its own context that may not exist and therefore make your information inaccurate. So those are really the main compliance themes that I drew from the FDA guidelines, but certainly happy to talk about it a bit further.
No, that was great, Erica. Appreciate that. And let me make sure that everybody can see us. I'm going to reclaim host here.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, when I looked at your map, I lived in Nashville for 20 years, and it was 2.5 years ago that Tennessee passed the Elvis Act, which is protecting people against AI spoofing their likeness or their voice. And I think it was the first out of the states to pass a law. Now you see your map with a lot that's happened since then. It's super interesting. We have been asked the question, is Authenticx willing to share the slides? If you want the slides that Erica just showed, when Authenticx follows up with the audio and video of the presentation, you can ask them for them then. So yeah, great presentation. I got a couple of questions for you. So, you talked about vendors. Every company now, medium to large enterprise, is going through a process of what do we want to do with AI? Who do we want to do it with? And what do you wish? What questions do you wish these companies would ask of these vendors, given the current regulatory landscape?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, there's a lot of questions to ask, first of all, but I think the question that I that helps me most when our vendors ask is when they want to understand what kind of model we have. And by that, I mean, are you using an open source model or is this a closed source model? And it's important to know that because of some of the things that I was talking about. Like, is your AI trained on anything that it's crawling the internet and absorbing, such that it's going to have some good information, some bad information, some relevant information, some not relevant information? Those are really important. I use ChatGPT and Gemini. That's what they do, and that's a really good use case for it when I just have a random question. But if I'm using it for my company and if I have a specific problem I'm trying to solve, I think I want to know if you're just training it on, healthcare specific information and information that is going to help the actual model that I'm looking to utilize from you, provide me with information that's actually going to be helpful and trustworthy, such that I can convey that confidence to anyone else that needs to sign off on it, including patients that may need to provide consent that there's going to be AI used. So, really having that understanding of the type of model and making sure that it aligns with the use case that you're suggesting or that you're looking to fulfill at your company, I think that's really important. And like some people ask that question and can understand that difference, but it's not always the case. And I think it really changes the value that you can bring, and it kind of cuts to the core of the question. Also, you may be able to get rid of a lot of vendors and then focus in on just a couple instead of having 10 on your list.
I'd love to hear that question being, yeah, that's a great answer to that.
Mhm.
Well, given all of the different regulation and the growth of all the regulation, what's the single biggest threat in your mind that companies face? Is it lack of disclosure, like you were just talking about? Is it something else? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the difficulty is really just tracking all of the changes right now. I mean, things are happening so quickly. I mean, the USAI Act was just implemented, 3 weeks ago. Now, while that's like I mentioned, it's not something for us to like have to immediately like comply with. It's more the strategy that it sets forth. That's just the example of how fast things are changing and what we're trying to do. So the risk is continued compliance with all of these different regulations. And it's part of the tension where we're getting all of these different regulations, but then the USAI Act is saying, don't stop over regulating, let the industry develop so that we can learn. So there's this healthy tension between what's going to happen next. Are we going to have less regulations such that it will allow us to be in this space more and work with different kinds of developers? Or is it going to be more highly regulated such that we need to have this core compliance at all of our companies? I think we should have core compliance in general, right? I'm a lawyer, so I should say that. I think that's true. But at the same time, it is just a really difficult balance to keep when you're trying to be savvy with your AI. While many companies have put forth an initiative to implement more AI, doing it safely and following all of these changes, it's a real challenge.
So we've got a question here, and I'm going to ask it. And realizing Erica, you're a lawyer, you're not technical. I'm still going to ask it anyway. This is from Matt Cohol. How are you
Okay.
seeing AI model fine tuning and the use of RAG in healthcare to address issues with the quality of training data and output? Do you have a thought on that?
So that's definitely more for our technical team than for me. But I mean, I can tell you that like the fine tuning of data, Authenticx, we use rubrics. So rubrics are going to allow us to fine tune our models specifically, like, first of all, out of the box, we have fine-tuned models such that it is healthcare related. It is specific to the various models that we have, our compliance, our insights, and quality models. And then we will partner with our healthcare clients to ensure that the rubrics, maybe there are changes that they would want to make to their training data or to the labels that we affix to the data to allow the outputs to be more fine-tuned to the information that they are looking for. So I'll kind of stay at that level because much beyond that, it definitely gets more technical.
Yeah, and that's a question that anybody can follow up with too when they get in a conversation with you on some of the
Hmm.
specifics. But that
Yeah.
was great. Yeah, excellent. So we got a couple of minutes left, and I want to ask you just at a high level, Erica, what's from Authentic's point of view, from your point of view and your role, what's the single biggest thing that you're keeping a pulse on over the rest of this calendar year?
Yeah, so for the rest of this year, I mean, I'm anxious to see some enforcement. Knocking on wood that, it's not us and it's not anybody on this call, of course. But everything that, I referenced in terms of the legislation, in terms of the guidelines, that's what it is. I mean, as a lawyer, we rely on case law to allow us to fill in the gaps for how the regulators are really wanting to see this in practice. And without enforcement or without different opinion letters being issued, there are gray spaces. So we do have some creative liberties to ensure that we're, meeting what the laws are requiring of us. But there is still a significant gap in the nuance to each of these laws, regulations, and legislation. So I think to see an action enforced on whether transparency was actually provided to patients will be really helpful and indicative of what we would tell our clients, in terms of best practices and what we would want to do within our own systems. So it's an exciting time in the law and in AI because there's like not been anything like this in a long, long, long time. But it's also really helpful to have some of those illustrative examples via the enforcement. So that's what I'm looking for the rest of this year. I don't know if it will happen this year, frankly, because it's all still being implemented. But I do think that that'll be helpful for the industry.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things that I track specifically is I use LinkedIn to track the number of people with the title of Chief AI Officer,
Hmm.
both in the United States and in different geographies. I do a couple of other things too. Like I think it'd be a good thing to add to it. How many venture-backed companies have got a lawyer on staff as an FTE too? Because these are things that can kind of inform your way of thinking. So,
Hmm.
the growth of the growth of the chief AI officer position has been written about a bunch, but it's exploding just to use LinkedIn to track it like I do. So
Hmm.
that's pretty basic, but that's something I keep an eye on just because I learn a lot from doing it. Erika, appreciate the slides, appreciate the information, and appreciate the time. Again, if you're registered for this webinar, you will get the audio and video of the presentation after it concludes. And at that point, feel free to follow up if you're interested in getting some of the slides or for further information. Erika, any parting thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me, Bradley. It's obviously something that's a really interesting and ever-changing space, so it makes every day new. It definitely increases some stress levels, but glad to share the slides, glad to have the conversation, and looking forward to seeing what happens the rest of the year.
Erika Sylvester of Authenticx. I'm Bradley Metrock of Project Voice. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Until next time.